Hello there, my name is Gavin Walsh and today is Tuesday the 23rd of December 2025. Last January I put up a video about the tragic crash, a collision of an American Airlines jet and a US military helicopter over the Potomac River in Washington DC, in which all occupants were killed. I believe 60 passengers and 4 crew on the American Airlines 5342 and 3 in the US military helicopter. At that time, I received quite a few private messages asking what my opinions were on DEI and was DEI to blame. Now, I'd prefer to stay out of politics until all the factors come to light. But just to go on record, of course, I would be against DEI and anything to do with safety, as anyone in their right mind would be. That is not to say that DEI played a role in this instance. However, something very startling happened last Wednesday, the 17th of December in the United States, in which I will explain it after I'm going to rerun the video. I think it's about 8 minutes long. And after I rerun that video, I'm going to explain to you what happened last Wednesday, which literally changes everything. It still doesn't give a yea or a nay on DEI, but it does point to something, I wouldn't so much as say sinister, but something rather profound as to who was responsible for the crash. Okay, so if you stay through for the next few minutes, you'll get the rest at the end. Okay. Hi there, my name is Gavin Walsh and I'm, I suppose, what you would call an aviation amateur or an aviation enthusiast. And I've been following air crashes and the causes of same practically all of my adult life. It's just a fascination I have, not with the morbidity or anything like that, but with all the things that have to go wrong and then backtracking to see if any of them could have been put right. And as we know, the United States is the gold standard for air safety worldwide, and closely followed by the likes of Western Europe and generally the industrialized developed Western world, like countries like Japan and Australasia, New Zealand, etc. They would all be of a similar standard. But America holds itself as the standard for everyone else to follow. And the last crash in the United States was in February 2009, Air Colgan in Buffalo, New York State. And since then, there's been almost 16 years, bar 1 month, I believe. Yeah, 16 years of crash-free America. There was one person killed in a Southwest Airlines accident a few years back, but basically, there's been no mass casualties and no hull losses with fatalities on board. And of course, this all came to an end on Wednesday night when American Airlines flight crash going into Washington DC, and just very sad. A broken record of almost 16 years, and some of the statistics I'm going to give you are absolutely mind-boggling. Firstly, there are 45,000 commercial flights a day in the United States, carrying some 2.9 million people. So almost 3 million people fly every day. That's the equivalent of the entire population of Ireland traveling every 43 hours or something. But as I say, everything came to a sudden, an abrupt end on Wednesday night. And sadly and prophetically, this was predicted by lots of people. Even I, as an amateur, everyone knew it was going to happen because of the sheer number of the increasing gravity of runway incursions and near airport, near the ground, near misses. In 2023 alone, there was 19 of these, all very serious. Some of them almost, within a hair's breadth. One of the big ones was JFK approximately a year or two ago, but the biggest of them all occurred in San Francisco, and well over 1,000 people would have been killed as jets fully fueled were lined up to go on a taxiway, and another plane almost coming into land almost collided into them. So there's something terribly wrong for such a safe country that has had a gold standard for so many years. Something's been going terribly wrong in recent years, especially when everyone in the business was predicting Wednesday night's crash. With only one consolation, anyone that would have predicted would have thought hundreds would have been killed, because that was a relatively small regional airliner, and it was a helicopter that went into it, and not the other way around, incidentally. And if it had been two major jets, which was almost the case in JFK, there would have been hundreds, high hundreds of people killed. So the system is in dire need of an overhaul. There's something terribly wrong. Something has crept in. Probably a number of things. No doubt, COVID, with a lot of people retiring, hastened the safety demise of it all. But it's just extremely sad that it all came crashing down on Wednesday night in the literal sense as well as the metaphorical sense. The NTSB, when they train people, they generally go down to they generally introduce them to two words, and they're drilled into them. And the first word is crash, and the other word is accident. Now, believe it or not, there's a definitive difference in them. The definition of a crash, in terms of a vehicle, is something that collides violently with an obstacle or another vehicle. The definition of accident, and these are actual definitions, Oxford Dictionary or whatever, the definition of the word accident is an event that happens by chance or that is without apparent or deliberate cause. Well, sadly, that rules out the event on Wednesday night has been an accident. It was literally a crash versus an accident. In other words, it was entirely predictable, which indeed it was. And you will find several people on YouTube over the last 2 years predicting this was going to happen. Easy enough to predict given how many near misses there have been. It was always a matter of time before one would slip through, and it happened. I've put together a little video of a shocking event that happened the night before, 24 hours before this crash, at the same airport, in the same airspace, with the same airline, and also with the same secondary, i.e. a helicopter, under the same circumstances. But this time a thing called TCAS, which is Traffic Collision Advisory System, kicked in and saved the day because the pilot was at 1,500 feet. Unfortunately, his colleague the following night was under 1,000 feet, and TCAS just didn't pick up. It doesn't pick up at low level because it'd be going nuts around the airports and picking up all sorts of traffic. But when you see the video, if you look down on the bottom left, you will see the time is 1 a.m. in the morning. That's because it records everything in aviation is done in UTC. Now, UTC coincides with GMT in the winter months. So all you got to do to get the true time in Washington, D.C. is deduct the 5 hours. So instead of seeing 1 something a.m., what you're about to witness actually happened at 8 something p.m. the evening before. So, and it's riveting that this actually took place the night before. And thankfully, nobody was killed in this one. But how there wasn't major alarm bells sent off that, how this didn't bring about a shutdown by the next night is beggars belief. But okay.
Fabric Air 4495, revision 19.
Rio 4495, Washington Tower, runway 19, clear to land, traffic departure, flight arrival.
19 clear to land, Air 4495.
American 365, look forward to being in contact with home departure. Good day.
Departure American 365.
Blue Street 5384, the winds are showing 160 at 3, runway 15, clear for takeoff.
Hey, Tower, we had a RA, Big 4514 is going around.
That Big 4514, so would you like to go around? Appears to be going around, so go around. Turn right heading 250, climb maintain 3000.
250, climb maintain 3000, Big 4514.
3565, turn right, taxi, Foxtrot, right on Juliet, ground point 7.
Right Fox, right Juliet, ground point 7, so 25.
Okay, back to today, Tuesday, December the 22nd, 2025. Last Wednesday, 6 days ago, on the 17th of December, the United States government issued a statement, and I'll read it for you specifically what it was. In that statement, the US government formally accepted full responsibility for failures contributing to the January 29th American Airlines Flight 5342 and a US helicopter crash. This was a legal filing admitting complete negligence by both Army pilots and the FAA air traffic controller of the day. Now, that is pretty startling in the sense that, well, firstly, it's under a different administration to what everyone's blaming Biden for DEI, and the responsibility has now fallen on the Trump administration. But nonetheless, governments come and governments go, irrespective of their political lean. And the simple reality is that the current United States administration has accepted responsibility for this terrible tragedy. Now, this tragedy was both predictable, as indeed I and several enthusiasts had predicted it, and thus it was also preventable. And it now turns out there have been thousands, not hundreds, thousands of near misses at this particular airport. I believe about almost 100 of them were very, very serious ones. And as you've seen in the video, that if you've just watched the 8 minutes, you'll have seen the airplane that got out of there the night before and did a go around. And thankfully they weren't in any collision. It just leaves to ponder what's going on in big government. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, by the way. I believe it was just a terrible, terrible tragedy that was both, as I said, predictable and thus preventable. Just very, very sad overall that all those people unnecessarily lost their lives. It does, of course throw up the big question, because the US government, like any government, but specifically the United States government, has so many tentacles. It throws up a lot of questions as regards to how complex and collective the government is. In other words, while the FAA now and the military are effectively going to go down for the crash, and no doubt American Airlines are in a state of relaxation, for want of a better word, because they're off the hook for any litigation at this point, it would appear. But not only have the government blamed their very own FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and the US military. The other branch of the American aviation, which is the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, they're still investigating the crash. Now, I'm sure their investigation is almost at a near conclusion. They generally take 12 to 18 months, so we can expect a full outcome for that inquiry, and that will be the detailed answer, and that will answer the DEI. So the question over the DEI, for now I'm holding my breath on any of it. It's just too premature to speculate, but it will be very interesting to see precisely what went wrong. Okay. Now, on a sort of a festive season note, little bit of good news regarding my St. Kevin project. I got a message on Facebook last weekend from a British aviator who wishes to remain anonymous. Turns out that I was raised in a masonette in Dorley Park, and it turns out that his family lived in it before us. So that's all I'll say on the matter. But he sent me a message on Facebook to say he had purchased my books. And naturally, I said I appreciate it and thank you very much. I didn't know who he was at the time till I made the connection after the messages. And I thanked him profusely. And as a pure means of nosiness on my part, I said, how did you get them? And did you pay much postage? And because what I was doing with anyone in the UK, I was driving to Belcoo, Black Lion Belcoo, and I was mailing them to them and saving them all the hassle of Brexit and whatever you call it, excise and customs and all that. Plus the shipping was about a third of the cost. So this guy came back and he said, no, I got them in Waterstones here in the UK. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And he sent me through the link, and I'll send you through that. I'll post that link up here, or to pick an image of that link up here. So thankfully now the books are finally not just all across Ireland, but they're all across Britain in Waterstones. And someone else contacted me the same day to tell me that they had seen them on the shelves in Hodges and Figgis in Dublin, which is pretty big, But considering that Waterstones are a sister ship of Barnes & Noble, the largest book retailer in the United States. In fact, I think Waterstones might actually own Barnes & Noble. I'm happy to say the least. I won't be counting my chickens before they hatch, because I only ever printed a very small number. That said, do note there's very few of Volume 1 left, and I've always predicted these will hopefully become a collector's item. So there's very few of Volume 1 left, by the way. So get out and get them for your Christmas gift. And by the way, happy Christmas to everybody. And let's roll on to 2026 and get justice for the victims of the St. Kevin. Up St. Kevin. Happy Christmas, everybody. Take care.